Welcome back to Kalico-K. We're going to do the first of 9 Easter mini stitches today, and we're basing it on a 3.5 inch square felt base. I'm using green for this one, and it's a wool polyester mix, so it's got a nice flexibility to it. The 100% polyesters can be a little stiff. Sometimes that's easier to work with. I prefer something with a little bit of movement in it for my own personal taste, but honestly it doesn't matter. So we're slow stitching this one. I'm obviously going to be stitching slightly faster than slow, but you can take your time and you can add what you want to add. You can follow this one, you can use it as an inspiration piece, it can give you some ideas, but this one is a really lovely simple one. It's just using a running stitch and a couple of little lazy daisy stitches, and you'll find all of the embroidery stitches in the videos with that are just embroidery sets. So you'll find those, look in the playlist. And so this one, I'm going to start off. I had this fabric and I was umming and ahhing, and I've decided I'm going to go with this one because it's a lovely little background piece. So I cut myself a square slightly smaller than the felt. So I want the felt to be visible from the back, but really the felt's just giving you something as a solid base. And I'm going to use a selection of buttons, definitely this one, and those two are the same, so maybe not those, and yeah, those 4 there. And then I quite like one or the other of those, not pink, definitely not pink today, so maybe the orange one I think is, yeah, the orange one sits better with those, so we'll use the orange button. And I'm also going to use some of this really lovely little vintage cotton lace, which I use quite a lot. I pick it up at market stalls and all sorts when we're allowed out. So I'm going to use that as a base for a couple of little ideas of maybe a garden fence or something, but just to split the image up and give it a little bit of depth. So I've got a couple of small pieces here, and I'm thinking that, you see, this is my photographer's head going bottom left needs to be your starting point, top right needs to be your finishing point, and split it into thirds. See, you can take the girl out of the photography classes, but you can't take the photography class out of the girl. So there we go. I'm just going to pop a pin in each of those, keep them where they are, and they'll come out as soon as we start stitching. So there we go, just make sure they're not too puckered up. And then I preload all my needles when I'm doing a slow stitch because I don't like stopping and starting. So I've preloaded with colours that I think I'm going to use. I'll definitely be using greens, and I'll definitely use pink, maybe yellow, not sure, but I thought, well, I don't know, white potentially, but no, because that's cream lace, so because I've chosen that, I won't use white. But I wanted to show you this as well, a little bit of a plug for a friend of mine who made me this gorgeous leather needle, well, it's a pin cushion really, but I use it as a needle cushion because I keep all my big fat needles in it, and it's also a great place to put preloaded needles when I'm working. So thank you Mike Frewer on social media, and he is the owner of Devon Coachworks. So I'll put a link in. If anybody fancies one, you can give him an email or pop on his Facebook page and say, get me one. So they are really lovely and really sturdy. So that was a special treat. So I'm going to use green thread to attach these, and I'm going to running stitch in and out of these little holes. So starting as I always start, I will do a couple of little over stitches on the back, and that just locks your stitch up so it can't wander off. And then I'm just going to running stitch in and out of these little holes here. Isn't that always the way? It's going to have a knot now, thank you. And again, so going in and coming out, and can you see it's just meandering through? So it's just adding a little bit of interest, but it's also attaching the base of this lace. Now I'm not going to attach the top because we're going to be using buttons and they can do that job for me. So that's the first one. And don't worry about the bits that are coming out here because there's going to be a button hiding that. So I'm just going to go in here, do one little lock stitch just to stop that from tightening up. Get the pin out of there, and then I'm going to just come down to the where I'm coming out next, but because that's such a long stitch, I'm sliding it into a bit of a layer of the felt just to stop it from being such a long travel. Just going to sort that thread out because it got puckered up, and then I'm going to come out in that bottom hole there and do exactly the same running stitch in and out and in and out all the way along until I get to the end. And then once I'm at the end, I should just pop back in and lock the stitch. Now while I've got green thread going on here, I am going to stitch a couple of the buttons in because I know that I'm going to be using green thread to secure them. So I'm going to come back up just shy of the end of there and get one of the buttons that I want to use down here, and I'm going to use that to just secure that end. Now we're not going to be putting these on clothing and we're not going to be giving them any sort of pressure or tension, so I'm just going to do a couple of stitches, and then I've got enough cotton left on here, so I'm going to come up somewhere in the middle there, and I'm just going to put the second of my buttons that are going to go down the bottom here, because I've decided that I want a couple of buttons here and a couple of buttons up here. And I've got this gorgeous button here, which is quite Japanesey feel, but it's got a little bird on it, it's got butterflies and things, and that's going to be a bit of a focus. So I'm going to pop that down in that bottom left hand corner, which is my big major, and my little minor is going to go up in that corner. And then I'm going to finish off creating a bit of background by using the Lazy Daisy stitches. I'm just going to take them off for a second. So I'm just going to pop this second button on, and you can use buttons very effectively on stitches like this. They really do lend themselves to these projects, and they are really good for securing things on as well. So if you don't want to have a big stitch securing it, use a button or a bead. So I don't want to push the length of my thread on that one, so I'm going to just end it there and then go over to my lovely big needle holder and grab another needle full of green, because I think I'm going to carry on using the green thread for these buttons. These are lovely little wooden buttons. They're just printed with flowers on them. I love them. I use them quite often in bits and pieces. They go onto bags and things that I make. So I'm just going to come up, pop that button on there, stitch it down with a couple of over stitches. There we go. And then a quick lock stitch at the back. Oops. And then the second one, maybe there. And once you've got your button with the thread through the hole, you can position it using the second hole, sorry. And just twistle it around and put it where you want it. So use your stitches to actually position the button. So I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to lock that off. And then I think I'm going to carry on using the green thread to attach that little apricot button. So I'm just going to come up in that corner. And remember again, don't pull your tension too tight. And then just, whoops, got button fingers. And 2 little stitches. I really have now, look, it's paying me back. 2 little stitches there, and then those are the little buttons all attached. So stitch that off, and then I'm going to come down, and I think I'm not going to use green on that one. I think I'm going to use pink, because that's got some really good pinks in it, just by way of a change. So I shall use a pale pink, which is a pretty good match for these birds and flowers on it. So little lock stitch at the back here, and I don't go all the way through when I'm using felt. I just use a couple of the layers of it, and there's nothing at the front. And then the bird's going to sit kind of there, so I come up about here. That should give me a good starting place. Now when you have a button with 4 holes, these have all got 2, so they're easy. You can either do a crisscross or you can do a little box. I'm going to do a box because I quite like the colours that are in the centre there, and I don't really want to go over the top of them. So I'm just going to stitch in a little box formation at the back here, and I'm only going to do a single stitch because I don't want a load of bulk. It's just attaching the button, and as I've said before, they're not going to be under much stress or pressure. So, and then I'm just going to lock that stitch off here. Now I mentioned about the lazy daisies. I'm going to put one in the corner here and maybe another one down here, I don't know. Yeah, maybe. The reason for that is because I want it to have a little bit of background and depth, and also I like groups of 3, but I don't want 3 buttons because that's going to make it, you know, if I put another, there's another button. If I put another button there, it gets a bit busy and heavy. So I'm just going to come up, use a little bit of the felt layer just to stop it from being a huge stitch, and then I'm going to come up in the centre of this little area here. And when you're doing a lazy daisy, it's like a chain stitch. So you come up through the middle, you go back in, whoops, back in where you came out, a little way away, loop your thread around, and then you just go over the top of the loop, and that locks your first petal in, and then back to the middle, and you do that 5 times. If you're unsure of where your petal points go and you want to be quite neat and precise about it, you don't have to be, remember, you can just do them big, small, random, wherever you want them. They don't have to be uniform. But if you did want to, then you can use a friction pen. They're just like a felt tip, and you could just mark your 5 dots. It's usually 5 petals we put in these, and then you can just stitch to your 5 dots. I'm not going to worry because I don't want it to look soldiery and uniform. If it ends up looking like that, then so be it. It probably will. Having said I'm going to do it randomly, I won't be able to now. And just watch your tension again. If you do give it a bit of a tug like I just did, you just pull it back on itself. It'll go back to being loose again. And there's my fourth, and then back up through the center and back down again, out here, and I make that petal slightly bigger than everybody else, and there you have your little lazy daisy, which gives you your group of 3 but without the heaviness. So I'm going to just put a lock stitch in up here because I'm going right down to the other corner. I don't really want to take the thread all the way down there. So I'm going to put another one in here, and then that gives that group its 3rd flower. So this is a very simple slow stitch, although I'm doing it a bit speedier than I would normally. So you don't have to do it in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or however long this is going to take. You can spend a while doing yours and just be a bit mindful and think about what you're doing and consider what's going on at the time. And normally I put some music on, give myself, make myself a cup of tea, or pour yourself a glass of wine if you want. I won't drink and sew. And just have a bit of quiet time and gentle time. Sometimes I put a movie on that I know inside out and back to front, so I don't actually have to watch it. I just kind of have it on as company. There's some movies that I watch that I know what's happening without looking up, so I can do that. But if you just want some lovely, quiet, mindful time, then some nice music, or even if you've got if you live somewhere peaceful, just open a window when it's warmer and just listen to the birds outside. Early mornings now, just bliss. It's they're singing their little heads off outside now. That time of year. So the last petal is in place there. I shall just do a little lock stitch at the back, and we are at the end of the first of 9 slow stitch Easter minis. So there you go. Very, very simple for all levels. Children, you can do that very easily. The 2 stitches are running stitch and lazy daisy stitch, and obviously attaching buttons. And that's really it. It's a very, very easy one. I'm leaving those frayedy edges here. I like them. So there we are. So there's the first of the 9. It's a really simple little topper. You can put that on a card. You can stitch it into a simple hanger on its own. You could do several in a line. I'm going to do mine as a 9 square. You could use it perhaps, if you made a needle case, it would sit on the front of something very nicely. A journal cover, a book cover, all sorts of things. So there we go. Number 1 all done. I'm glad you watched, and thank you for coming and joining in. Bye bye.